Good evening, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome back to the weekly Armchair Sports Talk podcast. This is the United Show. This is Devil's Advocate. What a night last night was. It was an absolute crazy game of football. So look, we have a lot to reflect on here this evening. I'm joined by the great Phil Brown from Beyond the Pitch. We're going to chat last night's game. We're also going to talk, obviously, takeover talk as well. And also, look, we will chat about Marcus Rashford as well, because it seems like game by game, this young man is just literally defying all like the defying logic at the moment in terms of his form. It's just been nothing short of unbelievable right now. But look, we will chat about that. So do smash like the video, do subscribe, guys, and as always, look, we do appreciate your support. But Phil, we'll touch on last night, Barcelona away, 2-2 draw. Isn't it crazy? Like at the end of last season, we were talking about this club like having a long way back. And look, they're still a long way back in terms of winning trophies and all that type of success. But you think it's a great sign of progress that we're going to New Camp, playing them off the park, and we're unhappy with the draw.
Even if they've lost that game last night in a narrow defeat, there was so much to like about the approach of Ten Hag, the way United played, their attack and play, the way they played within a Manchester United, the way you want a Manchester United team to play. It's not just about going there, defending on, hitting the break, hoping you get a result. You want a Manchester United team to play with confidence. And one of the things the United team showed last night was they believe in what Ten Hag's telling them. They know how to execute what Ten Hag's telling them. It's exciting. And, this is... I went from last season just wanting to be able United players to look us in the eye after big games and not surrender. But now we're going and playing with a Manchester United swagger, even with a number of players injured. The players that are coming in playing out of their skin. We're no longer seeing players have 2, 3, 4, 5 bad games. They have a bad game and they respond by having a good game. And every single problem Ten Hag's had, he had a solution.
Yeah, and I think tactically last night you got spot on. Like, they're like playing Rashford up top and moving them from the left hand side. I think like when you seen Xavi had a plan for Rashford last night to play Araujo, obviously a right back rather than centre half, and the way Ten Hag, I suppose, changed the shape there almost was very good. And even like doing little things like playing Luke Shaw at centre half this season and adapted his system, and like I'm really impressed with what he's done in such a short space of time. And you have to consider like circumstances in terms of stuff that happened at the start of the season when you had the poor run of form at the start, Harry Maguire situations, Ronaldo situations, and how he's overcome all that in such a short space of time and thrived as well in that matter. I think it shows like the personality that Ten Hag is and kind of, I suppose, the aura that he has around the football club right now.
Yeah, look, I mean, like I said, every problem he's had, he's come up with a solution to it. The irony, of course, is that United are almost the complete opposite of what they've been since Ferguson took over. They've got it right on the field and they've got it wrong off the field. For years, it's been the opposite. Once we get those two things synchronized, Manchester United will be a very dangerous team, which I think is obviously going to happen in the imminent future. Obviously, it looks like the Glazer tenure's coming to an end no matter what. I don't even think it would be possible for the Glazers to do a partial sale with United fans knowing there's buyers in the background. It would be completely unpalatable to them. So they've got a football manager that is a Manchester United manager. We always talk about Manchester United managers that get the club. We used to hear that a lot. I think Ten Hag totally gets what Manchester United should be, what Manchester United fans want to see in their team. And they play in a way that is entertaining. I was doing my TalkSport segment before the United Arsenal game, or the United Barcelona game, and I was being asked, just possibly they could go out and get beaten. And I said, I completely trust this team and trust Ten Hag that what we saw at City, the 6 we saw at City, we'll never see again. I don't ever see a Ten Hag team getting beat like that again. I don't ever see United going backwards under him. I can't envisage a time where he will struggle for results. And I just think that he is so commanding on and off the field, knows exactly what he's doing. It's Ten Hag's football club right now.
Yeah, and the world's his oyster at the moment to look at, especially if we're going to touch on the ownership situation as well, because look, we're seeing, I suppose, a light at the end of the tunnel with regards to that, and hopefully something that we do get more updates sooner rather than later on that. But I think one thing about what he's done, he's improved so many players at this club as well, that when you look at it, we didn't know if they had a future. You look at the two right backs, Wan-Bissaka and Dallo, how he's really shaped them into really good players. Fred is having a resurgence under him. Rashford, I think that's probably the most obvious one at the moment in terms of him really coming on in his game, coming on leaps and bounds. But it's just he's made us believe again to the extent that, look, we're going to the new camp, we're going there, playing them off the park, and we're unhappy that we're not even unhappy, but we're sickened that we only got a draw. When you look at how well Barcelona are playing this season, especially the last say 10 or so games, they're on a great run as well. Beating Arsenal, beating City, beating Liverpool, playing Spurs off the park at Old Trafford. Probably should have got a win at Stamford Bridge as well. He's like what he's done in such a short space of time has been remarkable. And if I feel like if we can get a proper structure around him in the football club, in terms of the directors of football, we get financial backing, but also just if he's given time to rebuild this football club, like Manchester United can really become a dynasty again on and off the pitch. And I think that at this moment in time, I don't see any better man in world football right now to lead this football club into a new era than Eric Ten Hag.
Well, all the things that you just said, the one thing that was missing is we don't need, extremely wealthy owners to accomplish that. All of those things are entirely achievable with a properly run, funded football club. And we can get into, the owners later if you want, that's fine, and potential owners and what is right and what's wrong are. But I agree with a lot of that, and with the exception of two results, the City result and the Brentford result. Every time United have dropped points, it's been close, really close games, where you can see them getting that right. There's been a couple of really frustrating drop points. The Newcastle at home, Rashford missed a great chance that I think he would take now. Where that would have been a big 3 points. The Palace game from one mistake. United should have had a penalty in that game. Obviously the Casemiro sending off was an issue. The Arsenal game, last minute, those Arsenal Palace games, big points dropped. The Leeds games, those are games that you can see the it's such a narrow line between success and failure. It's not massive. We're not losing back-to-back City and 8-1 in 2 games between City and Liverpool, I think it was. So you looking at these games, you're going, or 8-0 was it? I don't think United scored against Liverpool and City last season in the home games. So losing 5-0 at home to Liverpool, unbelievable. Then losing to City, where you're not even competitive in these games, going to Anfield and doing exactly the same thing. It was excruciating. The gap between United being successful and that was massive.
Yeah, and look, the improvement has been there, and it's really obvious to see. And again, like the introductions of certain players like Casemiro and Lisandro Martinez, he's brought in the right characters to help facilitate that as well. I think that's one thing that's important to highlight there. But yeah, look, it's the fact we're the only team in England right now to be in all four competitions in this first season, and we're doing it the right way as well. I think that's something that needs to be praised as well. Especially like he had to overcome a lot of that adversity, especially at the start, and he had a lot of people in the media saying he was going to last 10 months in the job. A lot of people saying previous people, notable people in the media saying he didn't have enough personality to manage Man United. That could be the furthest thing from the truth. Like he's been a revelation, and Phil, the reason why I know we're coming back as a football club is everyone is getting rattled by us right now. Like all the pundits, all the ex-players, all rival fans, it actually feels good again that we're getting on everyone's nerves and everyone is quivering. Everyone's absolutely shitting themselves right now. The
Yeah,
fact that
but
they
look,
know we've a
there's
good
a cottage
manager.
industry in criticising United because,
Yeah,
as that old saying goes, hated or adored, never ignored.
yeah,
People very rarely have benign views on Manchester United. They either love them or they hate them. So there's an industry in both praising them and criticising them. I think what probably irks me a bit more is legitimate media organizations going into the gutter and being nothing more than trolls, because there's no, I suppose, good journalism costs money, but troll people, commentators don't. Anyone can go on there and say what I mean. Do you not want to be taken seriously? I would imagine some of these people that cycle out negative quotes at point becomes ridiculous. They have no objectivity. It's what's the point? There's no relevance
Yeah,
to anything you say. I mean, Jimmy Carragher, for example, when he was into a media career, most United fans will not like Jimmy Carragher, but he's had some extremely balanced, reasonable things to say about United.
yeah,
Melissa Reddy, worked for Liverpool TV, was one of the most vocal critics of the Glazers, came out and called them parasites. And wasn't too many Man United paid or previous employees coming out saying things like that. I don't know anyone who came out and said that.
no,
So, you can do good journalism and still get clickbait material. You don't have to delve into the gutter and basically become the whole raison d'etre is just to troll Man United fans and just for interaction. I suppose if that's what you have to do, that means you're pretty vacuous.
yeah, and I think that look they're doing it just for, I suppose, cheap views, and especially like look, the fact Man United, we have such a global fan base. They know any little thing they'll say, they know they'll get a bite. And look, to be fair, Phil, if you see me on Twitter, I'm prone sometimes to bite at some of this stuff. Sometimes when it's utterly ridiculous, I do tend to bite sometimes. But yeah, like some of the stuff we've seen, especially at the start of the season, a lot of people are having to eat their words. And look, it's great to see that. Look, it's all coming to fruition in that respect. But look, before we kind of get into the takeover talk, Phil, I want to get your. We haven't talked in a while about Rashford in general. We haven't talked in a while in general, but like, Rashford was obviously picking up his form the last time we spoke, and he was, a lot of people are saying, he's really taking on that burden of responsibility of being the main man, and we've seen like Jaime Fernandez really pick up that form, since Cristiano Ronaldo has left the football club. What do you make of his resurgence, considering like where he was at the end of last season when he looked physically and mentally spent at that point?
Well, he wasn't the only one. I mean, the atmosphere at the football club was a disgrace,
Yeah,
and there's many culprits, many people responsible for that are still there. Some aren't. How that was allowed to develop in any professional business is beyond me, quite frankly, and it has nothing to do with the manager. That has to do with ineffective control parameters from the top. No legitimate form of consequence. None of the players identified with success at United or even trying to be successful at United. None of them believed to be successful at United. Trust with the football club was broken. And it was really a disgrace what was going on, because the one set of people who didn't deserve this was the fans, and they were the only ones paying, right? Everyone else was getting paid to do this. So the players, in my opinion, still take responsibility because they should have played for the fans. But I completely understand anyone who struggled with mental health. It's very, very difficult to perform at your best when you're struggling mentally, whether you want to or not. It's not deliberate, mostly. So clearly there was a lot of mental issues with players going on to the football club that had to be fixed. And I think, and this is one of the things, the intangibles that Ten Hag deserves enormous credit for, because results don't come unless you get all those other things right. And he's had a legitimate consequence for failure that's been applied evenly across the board. I mean, he started the season out with Harry Maguire at centre back, and as captain, Harry Maguire gets 2 games. Now, most Manchester United fans wanted him maxed last season, and he's told you to play right back in. Cristiano Ronaldo, 2 weeks after getting the captain's armband, is booted out of the football club for letting himself down. Picked a fight with someone he couldn't win, because United fans had completely accepted Ten Hag into their hearts, and Ronaldo, was showing petulance towards the football club. In many ways, embodied what United need to get rid of. But I'm not sure he was there for football reasons anyway. This is part of what needed to change at the football club. So once you get that out, then you create an environment that gets the best out of your employees. Rashford is in that zone right now where, a lot of the criticisms that surround him have disappeared. His decision making, his finishing, his 1-3 finishing, he'd missed too many chances. Now he is probably the most on-form striker in Europe. I know Holland's in great form too, to a certain extent, but Holland's great if you get the ball in the box. Rashford can score goals from anywhere. I think you heard Thierry Henry talk about this in some sense, where you get the ball in the box, he kill you. He's a number 9. It's like Andy Cole, I suppose. In that sense, not comparing him as players, but just the style of play.
Yeah.
Where Rashford offers so much more. Rashford could play out wide. He can play inverted. He could be, he could play down the middle. If you look at his 2 goals against Leeds, they both happen more or less immediately after he's moved centrally.
Yeah.
And they both happen with his head. So he is in sensational form. It's vital that he is, because United don't have an abundance of goals elsewhere. Obviously, they have a serious problem up front that will need to get addressed. When they get a top number 9 and take the pressure off Rashford, to be this great every week, United will be a very dangerous team. But the Turner, he's a wonderful kid. He's a wonderful human being. This is the guy that dedicated his a significant part of his life to feeding hungry children, that walked the walk, that doing all the things that we want professional athletes and people in position to do, and people in position of power to do. Really shamed politicians in many ways, their
Oh, he
job.
did.
And he's never in trouble off the pitch. He's a great ambassador for the football club. He's a kid that's come through the academy, and that means something. United want to see players come through the academy. It's part of the culture of this football club, and it's great to see him do so well.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed is just his demeanor this season is just a lot different. And like you said, I think a lot of, I suppose, toxic people getting out of the football club definitely probably has helped. I think the fact that I think Ronaldo being out of the team has definitely helped, because we're not just trying to play through one person. Though our attack is a lot more fluid. I think we're seeing even a more improved version of what we've seen in 1920. Because remember in 1920 when himself and Martial, we did a great partnership, and he scored over 20 goals that season. We're seeing even a more refined version of that this season. And the likes of Fernandes in midfield are starting to really provide him with more chances to score goals. So it's great to see him like that. And like you said, I think he deserves a lot for what he done, like off the pitch, like for what, especially during the pandemic at the time. Like he really showed how footballers can use their platforms so for good. And like he really done that, and at such a young age, it's great to see. But I agree. Like if you're talking about right now in world football, right now in terms of players who are, forwards who are probably the best right now, he's right up there, top 3 for me right now. I think obviously you've Haaland and Mbappe in there, but he's right in there right now, like in terms of form. And like just if you're talking about all season in terms of consistency, he's been there. I laugh because like he was probably England's best player in the World Cup, and against France he got he had a cameo appearance. I just think Marcus Rashford can definitely lead this club into a new era. And when we do rebuild this squad, I would love if we rebuild it around the likes of him, around the likes of Fernandes, and really can make a big push going forward. But I'm absolutely delighted for him, because he's someone who loves the football club, and he came through the academy. He's one of our own. And
I'm not a massive fan of building a team around a person, because I think that leaves you extremely vulnerable if they get injured. And I think it makes you reliant on one player far too much. You build a team around 11 players. You have tactical diversity. Like obviously you have key players that play in certain positions. Casemiro is obviously an extremely key player for Manchester United. But, City are trying to do that with Haaland. And Haaland's injury record is not great. What if he gets injured? Then what? And I've seen United teams in the past. United had to sell Van Nistelrooy to win the Champions League. I've seen United teams in the past be built around a certain player, and you didn't win the Champions League with Cantona either. Where maybe become a bit predictable if you're built around one guy. United tried to do this for years with Pogba and couldn't. And it wasn't until they got rid of Pogba and became much more tactically diverse that we saw a dynamic midfield. So, if you take a look at the way Weghorst plays or modern footballers play, inverted wingers that are constantly changing positions, constantly changing their contribution to the team to create spaces. I don't know if Ten Hag's the type of guy to build around one player,
One player, yeah.
because
I
I
get
think it's
that
going to
sentiment.
be.
It's just like in terms of, I want him to be a key figure,
Yeah,
going forward.
he'd be a key figure, man. I mean, Rashford at this moment in time's earned that, and he's earned the respect of the whole football world. I mean, he started a trend with a celebration that shows the top athletes in the world are watching what he's doing, trend setting, and the kid deserves every last bit of it. I mean, I think about how many other players I'd swap him for right now. There isn't many.
Yeah, there isn't many players better than him right now. And look, the fact of the matter is, more teams are going to start concentrating on him now. They're like last night we mentioned earlier, like the fact Xavi had a plan for him, and then Ten Hag knew that Xavi was going to have a plan for him, and he was tactically flexible, moving Weghorst into midfield. Playing Fernandez on the right. It shows again, the tactical flexibility of the manager. Now, we will move on to the ownership now, because we've a couple of questions regarding it. Bruno's Lovelies says, Phil, I know it's a bit ahead of the game, but as a fan, what three players would you like the new owners to buy this summer? For me, it's whoever the manager wants, which has improved my mental well-being.
I
So, let's look. I know we're going to talk about, I suppose, the latest updates with regards to new ownership coming in, and what I suppose the process around them, who we want to see. But in regards to this question, Phil, if you as you're like yourself, and you assess Man United's team, not even so much players, but there are three certain positions even that you would like to see being addressed, like under new ownership or not in the summer.
Well, look, they need a right back, because the difference between Dallo and Wan-Bissaka is massive. I understood why Wan-Bissaka started last night, because he's a better defender than Dallo, but he has very little spatial awareness. He let a ball run across his body twice without being aware of where the Barcelona player was, and almost got caught out both times. He's brilliant on one-on-ones defensively. He's poor technically, poor going forward. His distribution, you can't do that at the highest level, especially in a position like a wing back. Dallo isn't probably a good enough defender, and he's good going forward, but not great. Not anywhere near the top 20 right backs in the world, in my opinion. So that's something that's going to have to get addressed. Obviously, United need another striker, a top class striker that stays fit every week. I think obviously I think they prefer Osimhen because he's big, physical, different player than what they have right now, but very similar to the way Ten Hag wants to play. And I do think they still need another midfielder. If Casemiro and Eriksen don't play, the drop off is massive,
Yeah,
absolutely massive. So they need someone. Maybe Sabitzer will start filling in that Eriksen space. I think back to that Charlton game when they started without Van de Beek, or started with Van de Beek and McTominay and Fred. Did not have Casemiro and Eriksen on. Had to bring them on after about 60 minutes to win that game. There was no creativity. It looked very much like last season to me. So there has to be a way to maintain in levels. If Casemiro is injured or he gets suspended, he's in a position that's conducive to getting yellow cards. So he's going to be a player that's consistently booked. He breaks up play. He's defensive. He's technically very good. But there has to be a young player out there that isn't going to want to start every week, but is of a particular level. The drop off isn't massive. And obviously Eriksen turned 32, so you have to think about how can he play every week. So there's definitely, for me, if there was three, it would be a midfielder, right back and forward.
yeah, definitely. I think they would probably be mine as well. I think. Look, I think Dallo, to me, still has a bit of development in him, but again, is it the case, do we take that risk, or do we go for kind of a more refined right back, especially in this system? Because I think one thing that Ten Hag probably next season, especially if we're fighting for, like, we're in the Champions League and we're potentially fighting for a title, we can't afford to shoehorn players. We're going to have to have players who are going to fit the system and fit it like a glove.
Well, I also think a top right fullback, wing back you'll get a better Anthony
Yeah,
with that, because they work in pairs. And so I think with the better wing back on the right, you would see a better player be Anthony.
Yeah, I think if a fullback obviously providing overlaps, also coming inside, and also as well, being better on the ball as well will definitely help him from a distribution standpoint as well. Um, Richard has a question for Phil here. It says, how does Eric Ten Hag combat fatigue in the squad at this stage of the season and going into the final third of the season? Is there anything he can do apart from rotation?
Yeah, so this goes back to what I was saying. There's certain players that he can't rotate because the contrast is massive. He's got away with, being able to fill in that left centre back position by putting Shaw in there, but Shaw is also his best left full back. Malacia is a really, really good player that you can put in left back if you need to rest Shaw. I can be concerned about rotation at right back. Varane and Maguire. You can play Maguire in certain games, but not all games. That's probably something that we'll have to address. I'd be amazed if Maguire stays beyond the summer. So it's not an easy thing to do because the squad is quite thin. If you look at the bench, you one or maybe two or three experienced players. Beyond that, you're looking at kids that really I don't think are in Ten Hag's plans. Like Pellistri, I don't think he's in Ten Hag's plans. He doesn't really get game time unless down to zero options. It's good to see Sancho coming back at a time when Anthony's injured. That's really, really important. But it is going to be hard to do that. Still Eriksen's still, from what I understand, another 6 weeks away from coming back, so that's still not imminent. So I think it is hard to rotate that squad because once you start rotating, you get into a lot of last season's players,
Yeah.
and the levels drop significantly. I mean, I don't believe Arsenal fans probably argue with me, but I don't believe United would have lost at Arsenal had Casemiro been fit.
Yeah, definitely not. I don't think so either. I think if Casemiro's fit, I think our ball retention is a lot better. We've a lot more protection in front of the back four. Like the drop from no disrespect to Scott McTominay here, the drop from Casemiro to Scott McTominay is
Of
astronomical.
course, I mean, you're talking about one of the best players in the world. Was he won the European Cup 4 times? Just
Yeah,
he was one of the best players at the World Cup. And as we see every week for United, I know he's partly the fault for the second goal yesterday, but the guy's sensational.
yeah. And the fact of the matter is, like you see, like why he's won so many trophies in his career because his winning mentality is just second to none, and just the different like how he knits it all together. And it's mad because when anytime I seen him play for Madrid, I never I didn't see his passing range as much as I do now at United because he didn't have to do it with Cruz and Modric in front of him. Like he didn't have that burden.
Yeah, I think also in Spain the tempo is a bit different.
Yeah,
So you're not, I think when you looked at United Barcelona yesterday, technically, I think Barcelona were slightly better than United, but United's tempo is much higher than Barcelona's. Their transitions are much quicker. I think that's what will outdo Barcelona at Old Trafford is that tempo and transition will be quick. Barcelona, there was a time period in the first half for 20 minutes where they just looked on a different level technically to United. Their passing, their movement, their pivots, Pedri and Gavi they're two magnificent young midfielders. They're only kids, but you can see their technique is fantastic. United obviously got the grips with that, and I thought overall it was a better team. I wasn't too disappointed with the result to be honest, but I do think I remember Varane's debut for United. I think it was away to Wolves, and coming off the pitch just puffing his cheeks out
I
because
remember. I remember that Ollie. Yeah, I
the
remember that
tempo
after the
was
game.
was just relentless, and that I think is one of the hardest things for foreign players to adjust to when they come to the Premier League. Is just how quick it is. I've talked to professional players and they've told me this. We're in Spain, it's a more laboured, slow. Real Madrid dominate a lot of games, most games, and I think you need different qualities to be successful in La Liga.
Yeah, and like I think we've seen how like the intensity, how that we playing a much more intense league, and I think you've seen that for large parts of the game. I
Yeah,
think Fred in the second half, Phil, covered
yeah,
every blade of grass, and the size of the pitch in the new camp, like Fred was everywhere. Like, and I think again he showed what he can do in the big games when he's given the job to do, especially in games where, let's say, like you said, we're come up against a more technically proficient team. Having a player like him, having a player like Casemiro in there, and we use intensity, use tempo, and we play with a press. We can really disrupt these teams. I think like look again. I would have said even if Ericsson was fit, like I said before the derby, I'd start Fred instead of Ericsson because obviously City are probably a more technically sound team. And even in that game as well last night, we did see like even let's say every week when we have 60% possession, I don't expect Fred to play because he probably doesn't have the composure to play in a game where we've most of the ball. But see the games where it might be 50-50 or they might have 60% of the ball, the other team. Fred, we've seen how Fred can be vital to this team, and yesterday, he was absolutely class.
Well, one of the big criticisms that was levelled at Ollie was playing Fred and McTominay in the same team because they were
Yeah,
arguably defensive midfielders. Fred does a lot of things that don't catch the eye. His tracking of runners is brilliant. Very, very good defensively. This was a major problem on the previous managers, not tracking runners, late runners in the box, scoring goals all the time. And I don't see it anymore. I don't, Ten Hag was saying he hates naive football. It's a guy that plays in the Brazilian national team with Casemiro. So he knows Casemiro inside out. They know each other inside out. Everyone looks better in midfield with Casemiro. But Fred, he doesn't do anything that is going to make a YouTuber highlight reel. But guys like that are the reason why you win football games. He's like a Ji-sung Park in a lot of ways.
yeah,
He's got tremendous engine. He doesn't complain if he doesn't play. And he's the Fred that I saw under Mourinho was really appalling, to be honest. I was shocked at how poor he was. And Solskjaer sort of rehabilitated him a bit. I remember Solskjaer when they beat Spurs 2-0, right towards the end of 2019. It was, and Fred was exceptional in that game. Like Mourinho had just taken over Spurs, and so he's been on this trajectory for a while. Obviously, last season was a write-off for everyone, but he's a very, very, very good squad midfielder.
yeah, he is. And again, like you said, you mentioned you kind of need them players in the squad. Like down the years, we'd have the John O'Shea's, we'd have the Wes Browns, Jason Parks, players like that who, again, like you said, they won't make a YouTube compilation. They won't be every fan's favorite player, but you need them players in the squad who do a job, especially in the big games. And managers can rely on them to put in a shift every now and again. So he
I
is.
thought
He
he
is.
was also smart in the game. The weekend where he had a yellow card against Leeds. He got criticised a bit for pulling out of a 50-50. But if he goes into that 50-50, he most likely gets sent off. Right? And everyone's thinking he got a yellow card in a chippy game, first 25 minutes, PSG all over again, don't get sent off.
Yeah.
And he didn't. And so, very easy to get sent off in that game right away. So, I think he's been very important for United, especially with the injuries they've had in midfield.
Yeah, and look, he's done a good job while Eriksen's been out. And look, it's going to be handy now in these next 2 weeks, Phil, because Sabitzer is obviously going to be back into the
No
squad now.
Casemiro this weekend, so it's going to be
No
important.
Casemiro this weekend, so Spitz is coming back in. So it's going to be interesting how the midfield numbers shape up. And looks like Scott McTominay is going to be back as well. So whilst we mightn't have Casemiro, we do have a bit of depth again now. So hopefully Joe Ten Hag can manage the squad in that regard. But I'd be remiss, Phil, if I didn't talk to you about the takeover talk, because there's been so much reports. There's been new bids going, like new people coming in with bids every day. There's numerous different people linked with taking over Manchester United. Obviously, I suppose the few biggest reports that we've seen is obviously the Qatar bid coming in, and also Jim Ratcliffe as well, coming in as well. And what you make just also, I suppose, first of all, of the interest that's been shown the football club, and also how long do you think it's going to take for like this whole process to, I suppose, this whole transaction of Man United to go through?
Well, I think, the general consensus is it'll be sold by April. I think that would be the Glazers' target too. That is entirely what needs to happen. Ned's preparation for the summer is going to depend on that. April's the end of the first quarter. That's whenever the Glazers will be expecting to take dividends out again. The club's not in a position to pay those dividends. They're obviously taking a massive dividend out and selling the football club. The football club losing 2 million a week. That's 100 million, 104 million a year. It's completely unsustainable. United cannot prepare signings for the summer without knowing who's writing the checks. As you saw in January, the squad was it needed signings, and they're scraping the barrel to be able to make them happen. In fact, they probably did well with what they had available and what they were able to pull off. Where was that now before? So, in these types of situations, they've got different approaches. Jim Ratcliffe's always had a sound business approach towards this, and praising United in a different way that other people would have praised them. It all depends on what you want and how much you're willing to pay and how badly you want the asset. I don't believe United will get stuck in a major bidding war, but what I do can see happen, the deadline is soft, right? Because if I ring the Glazers next week and say, "Hey, I'm going to give you 20 billion for your club," they'll take it. Right? They pass the deadline or not. So a lot of people hang back. They see where the selling point is of the club, and then they move him. I mean, a bit like United did with Malacia, with Leon. Wait, that Leon's at the price, then step in and pay that. You don't want to get caught in the bidding war, because at the end of the day, that doesn't help any potential buyer. And these are intelligent people that know how to buy major assets. So the Qataris have obviously the deepest pockets of those interested. I've had solid information on that for a while that they've been interested. My guess is they will end up owning it. I think it's going to be very difficult to oppose on legal or grounds. It's too late to gatekeep now, to keep oil money out of football. It's already happened. It's already been happening, and I would imagine there'd be some stern legal challenges to that if it was just purely on the basis that they're Qataris with oil money, and that really would be prejudice. Now, if they're Qatari people that are connected to a royal family, and obviously the human rights issue is a very serious issue, and I don't want to see, like we were saying earlier, United have almost got it right on the pitch. They don't need these wealthy benefactors. They need someone that's going to come in and run the football club commensurate with its values, its identity, the things that matter to Manchester United. I don't want to see what happens at Chelsea happen at United. I don't want to see Ten Hag removed from recruitment and every decade across the world being signed. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see United being run like that. I understand fans wanting this type of ownership because it's attractive. The idea of having unlimited transfer funds, this beautiful new stadium, but I would say that novelty will wear off fast, and that it'll be hard to nourish after a while. Once you start, it'll get a bit boring, I think. I would like to see United run responsibly by responsible people, but every single person that wants to buy the football club should be vetted to the exact same extreme, and there should be no benefit of doubt given to anyone. I'd like to see whoever buys the football club have a commitment to run the club in a way that it isn't being run right now, so that supporters are front and centre, so that supporters have a legitimate voice on the board. They're not a consultant. My 4-year-old's a consultant sometimes, doesn't mean I listen. So it's important that they have legitimate power on the board to affect things, and if United get that, then it's encouraging. But what I said something on the podcast earlier, I don't want to see oil money in football. Football used to be a millionaire's playground, then it was a billionaire's playground, now it's a multi-billionaire's playground. That's because of the greed of everyone involved, and so this is a natural consequence of that the people bidding for Manchester United aren't even billionaires, they're multi-billionaires, right? And that I think I would be surprised if it's not the Qataris that end up owning United.
Yeah, from what I've been reading and from all the bits are from all the information I'm seeing, it looks like it's most likely going to be state ownership. And I think the way I look at it now, not just in football, I get what you're saying in terms of like football, there's multiple clubs been owned by state ownership right now, but we're seeing in multiple other sports right now as well, the state ownership and state investment is becoming so common. You're looking at, like, even you cover boxing, you're seeing a lot more events happen in Saudi Arabia because that's where the money is. You know, like we're even looking at the Fury Usyk fight. They're trying to get that in Saudi Arabia right now. You're looking at the WWE, let's say, for example, they've got massive investment right now from Saudi Arabia. There's so many different sports right now in the world right now that's getting like, you know, state funding, and it's just becoming more common. And I don't think like I think right now, like if you're looking at the fact that bids have been put in, and like I dare to say, like whatever bid that let's say an opposing party puts in, they're just going to double it. They're going to double it. They're going to
I
do
don't
whatever.
know about that, to be honest. I would say, I'll tell you this, Keane. Um, they're not idiots. And they're not going to have their pants pulled down by Westerners just because they think they've got bottomless pits of cash. I mentioned this before on my podcast. I was with Woodward in San Francisco. It was the year United sold Di Maria, I believe. I think it was that somewhere. And I was asking him about negotiations with PSG, and he's like, they were extremely difficult negotiations. They fought me on every concession. You remember United sold him at a 13 million loss. Right? They bought him for 57 million, sold him for 44.
Yeah, I
They
remember.
couldn't get the Qataris to go above that because they want to get their money back. And he's like, they're not idiots. These are people that are extremely financially savvy people. Yeah, do they have the resources? Sure, but Stan Kroenke's wife owns Walmart. Walmart have a
We've
higher
had this discussion
GDP,
before, yeah.
than most nations, right? They have money. Well, that doesn't mean they're just going to start throwing it about because they have it. I mean, these are sensible people, so I have no doubt they have the ability to pay for whatever they want, and they will. But, you know, I see articles saying, well, they're not going to, be used, and not going to play to the, listen to the Glazers tune. Well, of course they're going to say it. What are they going to come out and say? We'll pay whatever they want for it. I mean, what else are you going to say if you ask any potential buyer? That's what I would say too. They want, of course, make sure that they secure an asset at a reasonable price where it's not ridiculous. And 6 billion is ridiculous. Don't get me wrong. Given that if people were buying this from purely fiscal perspective and making sure they wanted to get a return on their money and they want to buy it you would wait, because the Glazers are so financially stressed that the price inevitably would come down. But this is not what that is. This is about acquiring an asset that has much more value than its appraised value to the potential owner, and the Glazers know this. So I think the Qataris will end up owning it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like who will want the club more, and like let's say a Qatari owner, or let's say Ratcliffe, or whoever it may be, even if Saudi Arabia, whoever it may be at this moment in time, like what potential they see, like what plans they have to, let's say, like rebuild the club on the football side, but also from a commercial point of view. How can they reinvest in Manchester United in Manchester? Put that investment in there. Like I do think that that's something that is needed as well. Like the training ground, the stadium. There's a lot that needs to be
Of
done.
course.
I think the women's team's training ground needs updating. The circumstances they're working with at the minute it isn't great either. So like there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done with this football club, and I do think whatever billionaire does come in, I think they're going to come with some bit of baggage. There's going to be, obviously, like you said, I hope they're all vetted. Whoever does come in and they have the appropriate plans to come in and fix this football club, because ultimately it's broken. It's broken from the top to the bottom. Now, luckily, we've a great manager, and we've a likable team right now. That I think if we get the right ownership behind it and the right structure, we get our football club back again. And I think I mentioned this. I was doing a podcast here the other night, and I did make a point that one thing I want to see is the club try to rebuild its relationship with the fans again, with the match going fans again. Like the communication needs to be there. There needs to be transparency.
Well, that could never be done with the Glazers. For
Yeah,
the same reason Abramovich didn't want to do the Chelsea, where he didn't want to do interviews, because their ownership's indefensible. Right? I mean, Glazers did not do interviews simply because it would be utterly impossible to do an interview with any transparency
yeah,
and not be cornered on seriously difficult questions within a second of any idiot would know. So you're talking about people that stole your watch and told you the time, and you're supposed to be grateful for telling you the time. It's absurd. So these are these are people that knew their ownership was indefensible, knew there was nothing they could say that would placate United fans. I mean, these are people that even a year ago, when the rumoured sale was happening, had a microphone shoved in their face, couldn't bring themselves to say, you know what, we'll comment at the appropriate time. Or the Super League happened, when they had a microphone shoved in their face, they couldn't issue an apology, which is why I never took their apology seriously on paper. They couldn't turn around and say something as simple as, look, we got it wrong, we'll comment through the appropriate channels, we apologise to the United fans, we're grateful for their support. Nothing.
Yeah.
These are people, they've taken a circle of a billion and a half, and then they're going to treasure another 5 billion. They bought the club with someone else's money. It would have been appropriate to give some bullshit, soundbite, but they couldn't even do that.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, we've never seen transparency from ever. And even look, I think
Hold on.
like the football club.
Mom already ordered my
I'm on a podcast, you. Go on. Go ahead, Kev.
Live YouTube, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. Anything can happen. But like, look, that after the Super League, like they did have that opportunity to like rebuild. They did have the opportunity to even like try, I suppose, put a band-aid over whatever broken relationship they had with it. They never done it. They never done it. So like it's great to see now that look, they're going to go, and look, hopefully we can rebuild with new ownership, and we do get look, the right channels, right lines of communication. Look, one thing I would like to see, Phil, is like fan groups like the 1958, that they build a relationship with these fan groups.
Of course, absolutely. We'd all like to see that, and that needs to happen. Not just at United, but at all football clubs. I mean, football fans collectively need to understand the power of their voice. They need to understand that there's certain things that they need to put aside, such as rivalry and what have you, to realise that they have collective interest. I mean, I said in my other podcast that without the Glazers, there's no Hicks and Gillette. Right? Liverpool wouldn't have had that, and we talk about precedent being set. So it's really, really important that fans, and United fans once bitten, twice shy, need to realise that they cannot make this mistake again. That you can't, like, even if Jim Ratcliffe buys a football club, you can't get complacent and assume that he's going to be some benevolent owner that's going to, at some point make United fans front and centre. He's a billionaire. Stop it, you. Go downstairs. Sorry. So I completely agree.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to see is just that transparency. And we even if it's a slow burner, that relationship does get rebuilt. And look, it's something that Joe
Hold on,
definitely
hold on, Keane, 1 second. Come here. Get downstairs. Sorry, mate. Go ahead.
Yeah, like, look, it's something that, look, if we can get like a new like relationship built with the fans, that the club can kind of say, like, look, we've had this ownership, it's a new era. Like, we like, the fact that if you go back to Newcastle's ownership, let's say, for example, like that relationship Mike Ashley had with Newcastle fans was non-existent. Now we're seeing, I suppose their relationship with their owners being a lot more bright. There's a lot more communication, and there's a lot more.
But this is where a regulator comes in, King.
Yeah.
When United fans were originally opposed in the Glazer ownership, they went to the government. And they went to the government, and they asked the government to get involved to prevent hawkish type ownership. Right? United fans had asked for legal protections against this type of thing, but it wouldn't have just benefited United; it would have benefited everybody, and they didn't get it. There was no appetite from a regulatory standpoint to make sure fans were front and centre, because there was a culture of exploitation of fans from broadcasters, from everybody.
Yeah.
And the ruling class of the country looks at most football fans, certainly it did, as just louts, and so their loyalty is always with the people writing the checks. This is why there's no chance of any regulatory body preventing the Qataris buying Manchester United, because go ask a Tory government that's burning cash right now because of Brexit. It needs investment, because it's not just the investment in the football club, it's the investment in the city. You're getting billions of cash. And are they going to prevent that? You haven't got a prayer, right? Ask Andy Mitten. As Andy Mitten went down and met with the British government and asked them to get involved to prevent the Glazers from taking over. And the best they got was some shitty letter sent on their way about, we really hope this doesn't happen and please be responsible. It's worthless, right? So there's talk of a regulator and all this nonsense. I have no confidence that any politician or anyone of that, that is in a position of influence, whether it's in the Premier League or anything else, that will implement anything that is meaningful. The only way they will do something like this, don't get me wrong, the Premier League don't want another Glazer type ownership. Not because of the ethics of it, but because it's bad for business. Right? A poorly funded Manchester United and a poorly funded Liverpool is bad for business. It's bad for TV rights. Right? I mean, if wealthy benefactors went to Scotland and Aberdeen and Dundee United, or Dundee United and Motherwell started dominating, that'd be bad for business for the SPL. They need Celtic and Rangers dominating to sell international rights, right? You can't build a product off the back of Motherwell, and no disrespect to those clubs, Dundee United. Of course, the great European history before that, Dundee United, but you get my point, right?
Yeah.
The Premier League as a brand need a strong Manchester United and a strong Liverpool. And my suspicion is whoever is the unsuccessful bidders of United will turn their attention to Liverpool. And Liverpool's ownership model is going to have to mirror United's. They can't get parsimonious owners in there like the Glazers, because they're going to have to get owners in there that can match United's spending. Otherwise, they're in exactly the same situation the FSD's in. We can't fund this football club and continue to be successful when we have a competition with bottomless pits of cash. Inevitably, you're going to get cannibalized. So, truthfully, football needs a salary cap to stop this nonsense. I mean, Daniel Levy's come out and said this spending is completely unsustainable. And it is unsustainable, right? And I don't want sport and merit removed from the equation. People criticize the American sport model with some justification, but one thing they get right is their salary cap. And the whole dynamic of American sports is designed to stop dynasties from happening, which made Belichick's success with the Patriots even more successful, even more impressive, because it's very hard to do that in American sports, right? They try to make sure that's calibrated properly every year so that you don't have this sort of thing happening. So football needs a salary cap. I mean, I have a friend of mine that owns a League One club, Darren McCantley. And I remember him telling me that they were trying to get a third choice Premier League keeper on loan. That goalkeeper was making, 25 grand a week. They would have had to cover his wages from start to finish. They don't allow you to return the player back to July 1st. They want you to pay the wages all the way through. Right? No League One club can afford that. So the gap just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Then they pick off these kids from the academies. So there's no way to replenish your squad with young players that you can develop and sell. Because now they're getting picked off at 15. City going and picking off Jadon Sancho at 14 from Watford. Giving his dad houses and a couple of $100,000. I mean, it's worthless. What if Jadon Sancho stays at City till he's 18? Right? Or Watford till he's 18? Watford are cashing in 20 million maybe. 30 million. I mean, Sancho went to Dortmund, 10 million? He was down the last year in his contract. So, the lifeline for these football clubs, which was young players. I mean, I will never see a Crew again. It's now so concentrated to the best two academies in England are City and Chelsea. What do you think that is? I mean, take a look at how many players Chelsea have sold from their academy for money.
Yeah, their turnover is really good.
But that's how they. So this is not right, and this is why it's imperative that salary caps are put in place. There's limits on what you can do in terms of your academy, who you can poach, all these things. And if you do poach kids from academy, there has to be massive sell-on fees attached to that. Massive. So there has to be a complete re-regulation of football. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see iterations of a European Super League because the competitive balance is going to completely get destroyed. And I am against the format of the European Super League, not necessarily the idea, because Bayern Munich have won the league 10 years in a row. Imagine you're a Schalke fan. There's no chance.
Almost you look at Dortmund there, like Dortmund are almost like they're the second best team in Germany,
Well,
but they're Bayern's feeder club.
yeah,
You
and
know,
they beat Chelsea 1-0, who spent 500 million or something in January. I mean, but still, I mean, these results will become less and less frequent. I mean, I said in my own podcast, what happened at City could have happened to Leyton Orient. If Abu Dhabi had bought Leyton Orient, they'd be in exactly the same situation at Manchester City. And there's nothing about Manchester City's success that has to do with anything to do with their history. It has to do 2,000% to their owners. And if they left tomorrow, City would find themselves back where they were within about 5 years. No question. So, same with Chelsea. If they were running the way Ken Bates ran them. But it's true, you know,
Yeah.
but this is a fact, right? I mean, take a look at their how many league titles had Chelsea and City won prior to that ownership? I mean,
Chelsea had won, did they? 2?
yeah, I think one or two, something like that. So, and that was at a time when there was more football was much more of a meritocracy, not now.
Yeah, and that's where look, I think these kind of state ownerships and I think football is changing rapidly. And look, I think you mentioned the Super League. I look at Barcelona, and Real Madrid. They're looking at the Premier League right now, and that's why they're desperate. They're desperate for that money. They're desperate to catch up, and
Who?
that's where we are right now.
Who's desperate? Sorry, I missed you. Who's desperate for that?
like Barcelona, Real Madrid at the moment, like in La Liga right now, because like
Think
the
about
money-
this for a second, right? Do you know how many English teams have won the Champions League since 2007? 8?
Sorry,
Do you know how many English teams have won the Champions League since 2007? 8?
so you had United, Liverpool, and Chelsea in that time, yeah,
3.
3.
Okay, so Real Madrid and Barcelona have won the Champions League more times than the rest of England combined. You know the last time an English player won the Ballon d'Or?
Michael Owen, 2001.
English base player, Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah,
Who won the Golden Ball last season?
golden ball,
Was it
Ballon d'Or,
Gavi?
like Gavi, yeah, Gavi, yeah.
Yeah, Pedro Gavi. So La Liga's still winning the European Cups. Real Madrid beat Man City and Liverpool on the way to winning the European Cup. They're still winning Ballon d'Ors. They're still winning the European Golden Balls. So English football, despite all its wealth, has still not been able to dominate. I can understand where, if you look at the long term, eventually they will. But English football had a very similar situation to what La Liga has right now in the early 90s when they were looking at Serie A going,
Yeah.
Serie A is the power dominant league. We have to have a better product, sell it better, and we have to find a way to financially compete. One of the things that I felt was taken out of context with that Guillaume Balaguer, Jimmy Carragher,
Yeah,
and I think it was more a limitation on Guillaume Balaguer's language, is that La Liga has to look at this from a competitive perspective and go, how do we compete? I'm not saying that it's ethically correct, that they deserve that, but if they aren't looking at that and saying, how do we compete with the Premier League, they aren't doing their job, and they have really strict FFP rules. So if the other leagues are not looking at the Premier League and going, how do we compete? They're not doing their job. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, I'm not saying they deserve parity. I'm not saying that, you know, that what Guillaume Balaguer was saying, there should be an equitable distribution of resources. I mean, I agree to a certain extent, not for the benefit of Real Madrid or Barcelona, for the benefit of Olympiacos, for the benefit of Benfica, for the benefit of Celtic and Rangers and all these big football clubs that financially cannot compete anymore and never will, for Ajax. You know, when Anomaly get into a European Cup semi-final, well, those are going to become less frequent. I don't want to see it. Look, when I was growing up, kid, I remember watching Star Bucharest get in the finals. I remember watching Red Star Belgrade get the finals. Brilliant teams, right? The Red Star Belgrade team that got to the final was brilliant, right? I miss that. You know, I miss seeing that, and so I do think football needs to fix this problem, because the problem for me with the European Super League is someone has to finish bottom of it. And it would be devastating for a brand, for anyone to finish bottom. And inevitably, you would have the same thing happen where 3 or 4 teams will dominate and the rest won't. And I think most clubs have to be consciously aware of what happens if we go into a European Super League, and we're one of the weaker teams in it. It becomes harder to
Yeah.
attract players. You find yourself in exactly the same situation that Forest find themselves in. Past great, right? That history becomes irrelevant to young players because it's great for people like me that remember it, but for players that are coming in, PSG played a kid the other night, 16. He was born in 2006. My son was born in 2007. That's unbelievable to me.
My little brother was born in 2004. That's
Yeah,
mad.
so this is what I'm saying. Like, they have they don't relate to that. They don't relate to any of that. So, football has a serious problem with this.
Yeah, it does. And look, I think that's again, there's something where like I think when you look at like people like UEFA and FIFA, I think they have to. There's ways where they have to put the foot down. But like I think what you're seeing, Phil, is clubs now and owners now are finding ways to manipulate, um, you know, these financial fair play rules. There's like even you look at the way Chelsea have done it in January. They also almost nearly played a blinder, like with these big money signings, but sign them on like 8-year contracts. Like it's their clubs are becoming really astute in that way. And not that it's ethically right, but like to the extent where they're manipulating the game for their own gain, and it's something that's look, it's becoming more common, and like the Super League idea, I think is going to become very prevalent,
But
and we're
this
going
is
to
why you
see,
need a salary cap.
yeah.
Now, what City did, where they were hiding payments to people, that would impact their ability to comply with salary caps. But this is why FFP isn't fit for purpose, because it doesn't. I mean, how can United and Barcelona be compliant with the FFP? It's absurd, right? What UEFA's FFP, right? They're both leveraged to the hilt. I mean, if it doesn't attack debt in a meaningful way, where you're not allowed to carry a certain amount of debt on the football club, then what really is the point to me?
Yeah, what's the point of it?
It
Like,
just is, to me, it's a competitive barrier, is all it really is. It's designed to make sure that oligarchs and wealthy benefactors on football clubs don't push the price up of players and wages. That's really all it seems to me. And it was contrived by obviously the top clubs like Milan, United, and all that there to do exactly that. So, seeing here
yeah,
that United pistol, and I'll get a wee look at it in a minute, but that was entirely expected.
yeah, the bit, it looks like just the last couple of minutes that it looks like it's breaking at the bit's gone in. But look, before we wrap up, Phil, obviously, look, big game Sunday. I suppose big week coming up.
Yep.
Leicester, Barcelona second leg, cup final. I'm sweating on getting cup final tickets, by the way. I have the Barca ticket. I want to stay over for the extra couple of days. So hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, we get that sorted. But in that regard, Phil, obviously we're Casemiro-less on Sunday, but when you look at like obviously like McTominay coming back in, Sabitzer coming back into the squad, potentially Martial and Anthony as well. First of all, what would be your like all things considered with the I suppose the 3 games, the 7 days that we're going to have, 3 really hard games? What would be your ideal starting 11 on Sunday?
I think like United are at home against Leicester, and I think they'll be all right. I'd be more concerned with no Casemiro if they were away. I remember Sancho scoring away at Leicester, and Leicester run that bad run. They've recovered a bit now, and learning to trust this United team. The starting 11, given the fact that United are only 5 points off the top, if they were sitting 10 points off, maybe they'd look at this fixture differently. But they rested Varane against Leeds, and Martinez didn't play. So in some sense, they're a bit lucky. Casemiro gets another bit of a rest against Leicester at the weekend. So I think they'll be all right. I would imagine it'll start with De Gea. I think Dallo will play because they're at home and they'll be less concerned about what's coming at them. I think that centre back pair picks itself. I think it'll be Martinez and Varane, Shaw, midfield of Sabitzer, Fred, McTominay probably, and then we'll see what happens with Anthony. But Sancho, Rashford, possibly Weghorst, I would imagine. But if Anthony's fit, I could see him starting. Rashford going down the middle. As I said, the last couple of times Rashford's played down the middle, he scored, and so he's quite interchangeable. So I think it will probably be my starting 11.
Yeah, I see the couple of changes happening there. It'd be interesting to see kind of does McTominay come straight back in, or maybe does he, because Fred and Sabitzer have played together, will he kind of go with them for the start? Yeah, look for me, obviously the Habe in the net. I think Dallo needs more game time. I think he done superbly well before the World Cup. But sorry, yeah, before the World Cup, but even during the World Cup, unfortunate with the injury. So yeah, I'll go Dallo right back. Yeah, I'll go Maguire Martinez. I think Varane with the two big games you have in the Europa League and the Carabao Cup. I nearly forgot what name it's called because it's a different sponsor every
No, it
year.
doesn't matter. Ideally, I think
Yeah,
what Ten Hag would like to do is to be in a commanding position with about 30 minutes to go and make a whole host of changes and bring some players on.
yeah,
Maybe bring Maguire on for the last half an hour, protect that midfield a little bit. Maybe take Rashford off and give him a bit of a rest. So I think United will start fast, and I think United will win at the weekend.
yeah. I see like the likes of James Madison that may be a threat, but I think right like Leicester this season have been a bit up and down, and I think Brendan Rodgers at the end of the season may be let go. I think that may potentially happen. Because I think like look they've I think
Well, to be fair to Rodgers, I mean, they've been hamstrung by FFP, which is one of the reasons why you have to have legitimate measures against City. So he hasn't been able to spend on that squad. So if
yeah,
somebody else comes in and gets money, I still think Rodgers is a really good coach. But
yeah.
sometimes when something comes to an end, it gets hard to remotivate players. And I mean, I think he's done all right to turn that mess around in some way.
Yeah, like he's done okay. I just wonder, Joe, will he like if let's say circumstances financially don't change there, would he, Joe, maybe look to move on and maybe get like look for example, Phil, like Antonio Conte potentially leaving Spurs. Does Brendan Rodgers maybe have a look at that and maybe put his name in the hat? Potentially, you never know. But yeah, that 11 I'd probably go with that. I'd probably go Maguire, Martinez, Malacia, left back. I'd go Sabitzer, Fred, Fernandez. Anthony is fit. I'd like to see him start to get some minutes into the legs.
Do you want to
For
read the
Paris.
statement of the Qataris?
Yeah, go on, whack it out there. Yeah,
Hold on, there's been a lot of big words in this, so give me a minute. Um, Hold on, steady up, sir. I have to get the glasses on here, kid. You'll find this shit when you're my age, mate. Too much wanking. Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad Al Thani to say confirmed his submission of a bid for 100% of Manchester United Football Club. The bid plans to return the club to its former glories, both on and off the pitch, and above all will seek to place the fans at the heart of Manchester United Football Club once more. The bid will be completely debt-free via Sheikh Jassim's 9-2 Foundation, which will look to invest in football teams, the training centre, the stadium, wider infrastructure, the fan experience and the commitments the club supports. The vision of the bid is for Manchester United Football Club to be renowned for football and excellence and regarded as the greatest football club in the world. More details of the bid will be released when appropriate if and when the bid process develops. So there you go.
looks like the Qatar bid is becoming a reality at the moment. It looks like potentially right
It
now.
definitely is now. So we will see what happens on that, mate. But there's obviously other interested parties. But like I said, I do believe. Was that meant to say conducting yourself in a solo symphony? I'll start singing here. Nearly read out my OnlyFans receipt there. I had to start just to make sure to stop the right place. No. Look, I wanted the Glazers gone. I didn't. I mean, I've said my piece on the Qataris. It's more. I put a video up on what I think about the Qatari bid. So I'll refer you to that rather than taking over your podcast, mate.
Yeah. Look, do check out Phil's podcast as well on Beyond
you.
the Pitch as well. But look, we will wrap it up there. Look, as always, Phil, do enjoy your company. Thanks very much for coming on. Before you leave me, though, every guest, I do have to get score prediction.
You want me to get one from my daughter or you want to get one from me? Because we were both guests on this podcast. We've not kids. It's Friday afternoon here. My kids are off today and Monday. So I'm off with them today. So apologies about that. I think United will win 2-0 the weekend. I think they'll keep a clean sheet. I trust them now. I think they'll win 2-0.
Yeah, Phil's going to go 2-0. I'm going to go 1-0. I think there might be a slight bit rotation, but I still think we get the job done. And I'll go just again.
Ten Hag doesn't really rotate, man. He hasn't really done that. Isn't.
I know. I think there might be one or two tweaks. Maybe.
Well, if you remember that time they were in 3 semi-finals with Solskjaer.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest mistakes that he made was rotating that Chelsea Cup semi-final. And he gets slaughtered for it. Didn't make the same mistake the following year in Europa League, if I remember.
Yeah.
I don't think Ten Hag will rotate.
I think there may be one or two, likes of Varane, maybe, like he did on Sunday against
Because
Leeds.
I'll tell you, I don't think Arsenal or City will remain perfect between now and the end of the season, either of them. I think City will be partially galvanised by what happened, but that'll wear off quickly. And I think Ten Hag will kick himself privately if you need to drop points in games they shouldn't drop points in.
Yeah, I think that again it depends on how he prioritises these fixtures. But again, he's probably a manager who takes it one game at a time. And look, we've seen under Solskjaer in the semi-finals that he did rotate, and it was we I suppose ruled it at the end of it. But Reese says here, Phil was rocking the Randy Savage look previously, so let him do that once more. That's a Macho Man reference there. Anyone who's a WWE fan will know that. But yeah, look, I'll go 1-0 and I'll go Marcus Rashford, my good friend Greg.
I thought it was a Channing Tatum myself.
I'm going to go with Rashford to get the goal. I just think me and Greg have had a back and forth all season. Well, at the end of last season about Rashford, and I really did say that he will get back to his best, and he has, and he's even surpassed my expectations.
Here it comes.
We have another new guest on the podcast, lads.
I better slide.
On that note, guys, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in a while.
See you, mate. Bye.